Well, I guess I would make it much luckier. So its endowment would double its rate of growth in comparison with its competing ones. It's, by the way, got a pretty good investment record, but that's just a joke. That's not something that's at your command. If you continue to get the kind of work in genetics and molecular biology that we're getting at MIT, you will continue to gain in reputation and continue to improve the state of human life. Now, there's a downside of science because now, if you had a slightly demented farm boy, he could torture his own dog or poison his neighbor's sheep. Today, he can go to the library, get out of the encyclopedia a recipe for making his farm fertilizer, nitrogen, into a bomb that can explode the Oklahoma City high-rise government office. The capacity of dissidents, particularly dissidents who aren't contained by the fear of death, to do harm, is a downside of science. On the other hand, problems like pollution of the atmosphere, which come from the scientific advances of GDP, science itself will, in the future, help you solve their own problems and have something left over. So that I don't think of economics as its old title, the dismal science. I think of it as a fairly cheerful science. I just wish sociology and geopolitics and drug addiction and so forth were in as favorable a state as my discipline of economics is. Well, when I first came here, the typical kind of prank would be to disassemble a Model A Ford and reassemble it on the roof of one of the buildings here. I remember could have been even a Harvard-Yale game where explosives in the field traced out something like MIT, ya, or something like that. That's the nearest to Massachusetts Avenue corner and to Memorial Drive. Mine was on the just inner court, and the Federalist windows went down almost to the ground, and high ceilings. That was a really nice location. But if I went, maybe 150 feet, I might be where mechanical engineering drawing tables were, basketball team in the economics department. That wasn't at all like the present MIT, and I like the present MIT better than the older one. That led to considerable affluence, so that I had every opportunity. I wasn't underprivileged, never knew a hungry day in my life, and so forth. I was a bright kid. My older brother was a bright kid. Years later, when I got a younger brother, he was a bright kid. I think I had an enormous amount of self-confidence. I think in retrospect I was a little unfairly, I never noted any resentment in him. Well, now that part of my youth is, so to speak, standard, but a pretty good preparation to become in later life an economist. Not a businessman, but an economist, because heavy spending. Of course, I experienced that. Furthermore, when I was 10 and 11, real estate bubble going on. It's to start out with a slightly larger fortune. And that was experience of my family. That bubble burst in the second year that I lived there when the big hurricane of 1926 came. Now, that kind of bubble and burst has happened 15 times since in Florida. But it's all grist for the mill of experience for somebody who's going to turn out to be an economist. I had early memories, but I should also mention it was a foster home. Why? I don't know. I think maybe my mother was a premature feminist who, how can you tell? So half of my time between the time I was 17 months old and 5 or 6 years old, I spent on a farm. Of course, our telephone was a cranked phone on a line with 8 other people, so you could be privy to involved harnessing the horse to the buggy and killed most of the morning existence over the next 10 years. After 10 years, you lost more feet. After 20 years, there was no place to hitch your horse. Well, it's all the kind of experience that stays with you the rest of your life, part of the curriculum. It would have been a terrible mistake to have stayed there, but that's a different story. The effective choice boiled down to 2 places, Harvard or Columbia. Without exception, my mentors at Chicago said, go to Columbia. I was never one particularly to accept advice of my elders and betters, and kind of by miscalculation, I picked Harvard. I thought it was going to be like Dartmouth, Hanover, New Hampshire, and Columbia probably would have been the better choice. But my luck was with me. Publications than my age. Well, to me that was a blissful time, and would be good at. That's like a gift from the gods. In the Society of Fellows, I come out and I get this nice offer from MIT. And my wife and I said, well, this is a test. They'll meet the offer or better it, or they won't. And a number of people who were admirers of me patted me on the back, said, hey, good for you. And I took that to be a signal. Now, every third-year student at MIT had to take 2 semesters of introductory economics. And therein lies the story, but that'll come out later. And most of the engineers hated it. That could happen was that I was earning more, getting a higher salary than any of the rest of them, so there was no competition. Wasn't my doing, wasn't Bob Solo's doing, it was Harold Freeman's doing. But the horseshoe and the MIT that it is. Harvard Business School, PhD in economics. but I'm speaking colloquially. He was a loose cannon on the deck, but Carl Compton gave him free realm to be that loose cannon on $10,000. But this is a Wellesley Radcliffe common room talk. In my time at MIT, they're taller, and I can tell you that the easiest place to go through if you're a bright kid and don't want to do any work was Harvard. Specialization, course 14 degree until later. Starting out when he was senator and through the time that he was candidate for the primary, and then the nominated thing, and then the president-elect. Moses, like I, did not go into the promised land, though, but I could have if I had wanted to. And MIT was an important reason for that. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is in our back door, you know. I knew Draper from committee meetings earlier, and I knew Edgerton, who was actually a Belmont neighbor. But the I. Robbie, the third guy at there, worked with him a lot, and Yvonne Getting, who was a very important person at MIT, then at Harvard, then in the Defense Department, was in the Society of Fellows with me and was my boss at the Radiation Laboratory. Some of the greatest mathematicians in the world were there. It was a important crew, and people like Vicky Weisskopf and others who came to MIT. Because when I came to MIT, I think that Slater was the only world-class physicist. 10 years later, there were more world-class physicists at MIT than any other place, but it took us a long time to begin to get Nobel Prizes from them. Our first Nobel Prize was actually in biology when we imported a whole lab from the University of Wisconsin. But it's been an enriching experience knowing, you know, Norbert Wiener, whom I knew real well, and somebody like Elting Morrison, who was a cousin of the historian Morrison, came from a famous Boston family, taught literature in the Sloan School, was a good friend. We had artificial intelligence, you know, the difference between the modern computer age and what it was like then is different. I would go to the math library, and so I was still publishing papers during the time of the war, but it was moonlighting, and I was actually revising my prize dissertation. So the war years were very busy, but not happy years. And of course, most of my mentors were in Washington, Harvard mentors. But I never felt that the radiation lab efforts of a person like myself were, once I ceased to be a junior fellow and was free to take a degree, I did. But it's interesting that I got my job at MIT, and Bob Solar got his job at MIT before having a PhD, because engineering schools didn't make a fetish of that, since most engineers in those days didn't get PhD degrees. And then he said, in order to make a good cup of coffee, you must be sure that your water is boiling hot. Well, that's not Caltech, like engineering. And that's why Wiener was here. Norman Levinson, who was probably the luminary mathematician, had been a protege of Norbert Wiener, and gradually we got first-class, world-class mathematicians and physicists. Vicky Weisskopf was a much liked and respected person. I knew all these guys. I like quiet times. The present department is not a carbon copy of my aspirations. I'm not saying that there are things there that I dislike. That's not so. But I think of one of my mentors, Professor Leontief, when Harvard didn't want to build a permanent little shrine to his input-output life work. He was angry and he quit Harvard. I don't want anybody to create a little shrine on my life work. Do their own life work. Sniping of my textbook tremendously and unfairly from witch hunts, and plenty of MIT people involved, members of the math department who'd been members of the Communist Party, which was not at all illegal. Most of the convictions and stuff in those cases were in the cover-up. The moment you were told a lie, your goose was cooked, your first lie. And it's very easy to tell that first lie because you've outgrown a past, you broke no law, and you don't want to have anything change. And you make the story a little prettier than it actually was, and that's not good. The pressures, if anything, economics has moved a lot rightward from where it was and from where I am. But I don't think anybody's freedom is being impinged, but I don't like it when in state documents, I don't know whether you happen to notice the testimony of the 4-year Surgeon General of the United States, that he was required to name Bush's name 3 times on every page of anything that he wrote, and not allowed to talk about disabled children because that prominent family would be benefited. That prominent family turned out to be the Kennedy family. I think that we're in in all the history of this democracy, this is one of the most deplorable regimens, and will probably go down in history as recognized to be that. Well, no, I don't. Well, I've written some things that needed to be written, but that weren't, at least at first, well received. That globalization is a good thing, both for the developing country and the developed country, as far as the total average is concerned, but it brings with it an increase in inequality, which it's hard to alter. And I overtook at MIT, or saw given, it was 99% closer to an MIT exam than anything I had seen, so that the Princeton and Harvard that were no competition to us are damnably effective competition to us now. But I like that. I don't mean I like being outcompeted, but I like the better paradigm spreading over the less good paradigm.